Hello, everyone. Welcome to Promethean Action's Thursday live question and answer show. My name is Adam Sturman. I'm a producer and editor here with Promethean Action, joined with the lovely Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd, both from Promethean Action. Barbara is also the treasurer of our sister organization, Promethean PAC. So before we get started on today's show, in the chat, let us know where you're from. I'm already getting some. I saw plenty of stuff from the United States. I saw a shout out from Macedonia, from Belgium. Cool. Welcome everyone to our show. So I'm going to begin today by. Oh, geez, my software here is already getting funny. Okay, so I'm going to begin the show today with just a thank you to somebody. I can't pull up the comment now, unfortunately, but somebody mentioned that they had met us at a Lansing show when we were there for the Charlie Kirk Memorial. So we wanted to say thank you very much for that shout out. We really appreciate it. That was super awesome that you met us there in Lansing for the memorial. I think Susan wanted to just say a few things about that.
Adam, could you share the screen? We went to the Charlie Kirk Memorial in Lansing that was sponsored by the Michigan Republican Party a couple of weeks ago. And we obviously wanted people at the memorial to reflect at the memorial. But as people were leaving, we took our very famous dossier. It is the British who murder our presidents. And we stood off on the street as people were leaving. And we said, look, we have to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. And we literally handed out copies of this dossier. There were top Republican Party officials, there were state legislators, there were statewide candidates who took this. One top party official took one, came back and took 10 more and said, I'm going into an important meeting of Republicans. I need to have this. Now, I know most of you are not going to have multiple copies of our dossier. A little bit later in the show, we're going to show you our half-page flyer, which is something that you can use, and you can use at situations like this. But I think it kind of captures one of my taglines, which is, we don't just analyze, we organize. And I hope some of you can join us in doing that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to be right back real quick. I love the software, but apparently there's a bug. So I'm going to reload my webpage here. I should be right back. Okay. So don't worry, stream didn't blow up. All right, cool. Now, once again, I can see, I don't want to say what software I'm using, but in the software, I can I see. So first off, I look at every I try to look at every comment that comes through. So now I can do a shout out. Thank you, Yvonne, for your support. We really appreciate it. Thank you for coming to our streams every week and asking questions. Okay, so I wanted to actually start off with a question about Pfizer because I know a lot of people are already thinking about it. So what's going on with the Pfizer deal that was announced by Trump just yesterday?
The major thing that's going on with the Pfizer deal is he's about to save you a whole hell of a lot of money on drugs, and he's about to save the government a ton of money on Medicare and Medicaid, where pharmaceutical costs are like huge in that particular budget. Now, you got to separate the fact that Pfizer and Moderna and everybody who was behind the vax, basically are subject to a lot of questions at this point as to what they did and how that happened and how it came about. Our pharmaceutical industries suffer from a huge amount of corruption. Just think about the entire opioid crisis, which went on, the predecessor to our present drug crisis, where they, said that, all of these forms of painkillers were not addictive. All right. So that's what Bobby Kennedy and Marty McCarty at the FDA and Dr. Oz at Medicare, Medicaid are taking on at this point. And Pfizer doesn't just do the vax. Pfizer does a whole lot of very critical drugs in the overall supply chain. Drugs which are very, very expensive at this point, but are life-saving. And what Trump just did is force on them what he's calling most favored nation drug pricing, so that they're going to have to price things here in the United States at the cheapest level that they're priced anywhere in the world. And people are going to begin to see huge savings on medical costs. So that's where I'll leave it for right now. It's obviously a very intense subject for people. It's very much a part of the present government shutdown. We have a healthcare system which needs massive reform. And the Republicans and Democrats both, although Trump wants to fix it, they don't really have ready answers at this point to how you fix a system which is really quite astray. But I'm convinced that Bobby Kennedy and the people who are now running all aspects of it are going to come up with the answers. So that's where I leave my answer right now.
Thank you, Barbara. I just want to give a quick shout out to Dane. Thank you very much for joining us for these Thursday shows. And I want to make sure that hopefully you're getting our newsletter, or everyone's getting our newsletter. We do it's a daily newsletter at this point, because there's just so much going on in the world, and we do a lot as an organization. So I'm just going to put up here the link to our website. If you guys want to get our daily newsletter, the link is at prom.ac, or you can just search the web for Promethean Action. We have very good SEO on that name. So just any search engine, search Promethean Action, you'll find us. And again, just sign up for our newsletter. But thank you very much, Dane. Make sure you get our newsletter. We have 3 political briefings a week. Barbara does the Monday and Saturday briefing. Susan does the Wednesday briefing. And plus, we do this live show every Thursday at 11 a.m. So if you're interested, please like and subscribe to this video, because it definitely sends YouTube a positive signal. Okay, so let's get started with the questions that we've collected from our newsletter subscribers. What I do is I put the link to ask a question in a bunch of so. For instance, tomorrow I'm going to send out to the show replay from today, and I will include a link to ask questions for next week's show. So that's where most of these questions are coming from. Okay, so the first one is from Lynn. Actually, the first 3. Okay, so the first topic is going to be Tony Blair and Gaza. Right? Everyone's talking about this. Why is President Trump saying Tony Blair is a good man and getting him involved in negotiating peace in Gaza? I believe he is a Fabian and not on the right side. He is not liked in England. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, second question. The U.S. is reportedly backing a plan to install former British Prime Minister Tony Blair as the head of a Gaza International Transitional Authority. Why would we back Tony Blair when he is behind so many things? He's apparently received the highest knighthood from the City of London. Listen to the interview of Alex Craner. He's connected with Larry Ellison and all of the other ghouls. Thank you, Cami. Can anything be done to stop Tony Blair meddling in Gaza alongside Kushner? And does he have Trump's support for this move? Thank you, Barbara. And finally from Edward. Oh, no. So those are the first 3 on Tony Blair and Gaza.
Nothing that anybody says about Tony Blair is bad enough, in my view. All right. But you have to step back for a second and recognize that part of this is a huge British propaganda ploy. The person who's going to be chairing things, Blair was trying to insert himself to become the chair of this entire rebuilding process, is Donald Trump. He intervened and he said, I'm going to head that entire commission. All right. So number one, that's part of it. Blair was clearly trying to insert himself into this and to get a leading role. He is the head of what used to be called the Quartet. which was a prior effort at Mideast peace. And basically, he was a complete failure in that role. Even the Brookings Institution, of all people, said that the guy was a jerk and didn't advance things at all, and was viewed by the Palestinians as essentially being an Israeli plant. So that's number one. Donald Trump is superseding him. Number two is I don't think he had as big a role in this as the press is reporting. Essentially, what I heard and what I believe is happening here is that the Abraham Accords, or as Trump likes to call them, the Abraham Accords, are being implemented again. Blair had nothing to do with that policy from the first Trump administration. He's simply glomming himself onto it. Kushner is a very different matter. Kushner played a significant and leading role in the drafting of the Abraham Accords in Trump's first administration. Blair had absolutely nothing to do with that. So I think basically what's happening here is when you deal with the Middle East, you've got to actually have some recognition of the vast British interests in the area, keep them close to you so that you can control them. And, you know, all of the Arab countries involved in this, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, everybody basically has a huge relationship to Britain dating back centuries as a result of the Sykes-Picot carving up of that area of the world between Britain and France a long, long time ago. So if you're going to bring about peace in the area, you have to bring them close and, you know, basically put your hand on them and make sure they don't do anything to screw it up. And Blair is a key aspect of that. Yes, you can, all the things which people are saying, what Alex is saying is true. He's very close to Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison is the primary funder of his Blair Global Initiative. And if you go there, if you go to his website, you'll see Blair is, you know, the preeminent globalist in the world at this point, with multiple connections back into the Democratic Party in the United States, and also to the Republican side of things, which is how the British actually operate. But I believe, number one, that what we're seeing here is the first Trump initiative realized, which he had not a damn thing to do with. And second, now that we're in the active phase of actually creating a Middle East peace, we got to make sure that the British don't screw it up. And the best way to do that is to hold them close to your side, watch them, and to control them. And that's why I think it's very important that despite what the New York Times says, Blair didn't get his chairman of the board role. Donald Trump took it for himself. So that's why I answered the question.
Yeah, and I just add one thing in terms of the question of method. You know, people really have to free themselves from the idea that, you know, Trump is all powerful, that there are no other factors out in the world, that there's probably nobody out there, including all of us on this call, who don't have flaws. Some have a lot more than others, for sure, because of their ideology. And I'm reminded of someone who once said, when I'm looking at the way most people think about foreign policy, it's like a little girl playing with dolls. You know, you don't just move the dolls around in the dollhouse the way that you would like them to be. You know, Trump is dealing with unbelievable complexities in this situation. I think the next question is going to allow us to elaborate on that.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. I just want to give a quick shout out to Mr. Scrappy. I believe that's Australian. Thank you very much. We have some questions coming later from Australia. Okay. And just looking at the like situation here, please, we have about 1,000, 1,100 current viewers. Everyone on the live stream, please just hit the like button. That helps increase our reach on YouTube. Thank you very much. All right, next question. Okay. The Indonesian prime minister extended an apparent peace branch to Israel in a UN speech, suggesting that Israeli security must be guaranteed. This seems a promising turn and seems to support your basic ideas of national sovereignty, or is this a distraction? Could you comment, please? Thank you, Edward. And just let me give some background for people that don't know. Indonesia is primarily a Muslim country, if I'm mistaken, a majority Muslim country. So that's kind of the background to this question.
Well, I'll just take an initial stab at this. Look, I think the fact that Trump brought in a country like Indonesia, which is outside the region, is absolutely critical. Because it was never as we've seen from the way the British have managed a so-called peace process, which never gives you peace. You basically take the intractable parties inside the region. And as Barbara has often said, you try and get them negotiating over whether you get this inch or that inch. And you're in a perpetual situation. Trump has brought in people from the outside, including an Indonesian pledge to provide security forces, again, from the outside, people who have not been involved in shooting at each other for the past 40 or 50 years. So, yes, I think this is a very promising step in the right direction.
All right. Take the next question. Barbara, do you have anything you want to comment?
No, let's get to the next question. Sure,
no problem. Okay. I touched on this question in a prior question. Now it was spoken of in Trump's UN address. It was all with the drug trade, culling population, and talk of satanic ways of these ruling groups. I wonder if it included human trafficking, and it appears it does. My updated question is, why hasn't Trump or his administration come out and told us that it is the British Empire behind all of this, including the infamous Epstein files, etc., and expose their long orchestrated evil plans? There are so many off-the-mark conspiracy theories out there, so I know there is a huge audience for this right now. If Trump is afraid of his life, they have already tried, or is it because, as I've heard, it would cause a financial collapse, even though I'm not clear how that would result? I would love to know any answers or thoughts you have on all this. Second part is, why was Trump so complimentary of the Brits on the visit when he knows the truth and clearly should have at least called them out on their lack of free speech and arrests, and also of the Muslim rape gangs of young girls with no arrest of the perpetrators, but instead arrest of the innocents who report them as being Islamophobic? Again, thank you all, Promethean Action, for all your hard work and dedication. And thank you, Amy, for joining us every week and always asking us questions.
Well, let me take a stab at there's several questions here. Why hasn't he come out and named the British Empire as behind the infamous Epstein files? Well, because basically, what is going on with the Epstein files is people think it's all about sex trafficking and sex. My own view of the Epstein files is that it's much more about intelligence operations. And that's an unexplored area right now that needs to be explored. And I'll just leave it at that, because people focus on did Epstein blackmail people? Is Epstein blackmailing key officials in the Trump administration? What's going on with that? I think Mike Benz has the best view of that. If you're a major operative within the financial side of financing covert operations, which appears to me to be Epstein's role, you're not going to blackmail people because it dries up your resource base. In other words, once it gets out in these circles that you're blackmailing them around sex, you're not going to get any more clients. So this to me, if you look at what the actual basis of this plea deal was, everybody who made a claim in the original plea deal in one way or another that Jeffrey Epstein even touched me was open to a huge monetary settlement from Jeffrey Epstein's estate. They all got paid. They got paid to complain. So you really got to ask yourself, what was the purpose of this, second and third prosecution of things which happened beyond the statute of limitations, just like Harvey Weinstein and all of these other multimillionaire sexual grifters. All right. I tend to think that it's very fruitful to look at what Mike Benz is looking at. Epstein's first major client was Adnan Khashoggi. If you know about Iran-Contra and that huge scandal, that's the black money market for CIA, MI6, and other covert operations. What did Adnan Khashoggi do, which was part of his culture? Well, to keep his clients happy, he provided young ladies at every opportunity, at every business meeting he had. That's a perk for doing business with him. In my view, that's the same thing that Epstein was doing, although it went into, basically in his early days, actually abusing young people. So is it the scandal? Is that the area of the scandal? I don't think so. I think it opens up a whole can of worms, however, which needs to be looked at about the actual intelligence connections of Jeffrey Epstein. And I suggest, after thinking about that an awful lot, that the sex thing is really a diversion away from the actual intelligence function of this dark money operation run by both MI6 and by the CIA. So that's a little bit different take on that part of the question. And, I'm going to suggest to you that in terms of Donald Trump, all of the heat on him at this point as somehow being involved in this is really a Democratic Party ploy to try and split the Trump base off from him. It's part of an overall strategy, which they have at this point, to destroy the very interesting coalition, which is put together by which Trump won in 2024. Pam Bondi screwed up, no doubt about it, the original Epstein release. But my question about that is, did she have she's working from a Justice Department, which is still heavily infiltrated and probably, in my view, was set up on that particular thing. Didn't have any idea what the universe was of these files that she was releasing, and tried to fulfill a promise she thought from the Trump campaign. It was a mess. It was a screw up. You have to admit that. And it set off this whole crazy thing, but it's primarily aimed at trying to screw up Donald Trump, when clearly, if these guys had the goods on Trump, and you just look at the history of this thing, it would have come out a long, long time ago, like during the Biden administration, when the second Epstein prosecution actually took place. So you gotta look at this. You gotta see that there's a lot of things, moving parts here in terms of what's actually going on. I think we're going to get to it, but I just think there's a whole lot of stuff going on the internet at this point, which is all trying to basically split the Trump base away by indicating that Trump has sold out on one promise or another. This one being the promise to clean up the sex trafficking networks. That's not necessarily true. There just was a major arrest of a Wall Street financier for sex trafficking 2 days ago. I don't have the coverage here in front of me. And the major impetus the Trump administration is taking is finding the kids who were brought into the country as unaccompanied minors and then trafficked through the Biden administration into all of this stuff. That, to me, is the major front of this fight at this point, and it's not being publicized enough. They found about, I think the last figures I saw was like 25,000 of these kids who've been reunited with their parents. But that, to me, is the center of this entire sex scandal. With regard to telling the Brits off about their censorship policies and what's going on, I assure you that I'm pretty sure that took place not publicly, but in conversations with both the King and most certainly with Keir Starmer. So I'm pretty sure that happened on that visit.
Yeah, and let me just add one other thing, because, again, people have to start thinking much more strategically and tactically. So let's go back to the question of the recent dump of the Epstein files. Who was the first person who fell because of the recent dump of the Epstein files? It was the British ambassador to the United States, Lord Peter Mandelson. He was recalled as a result of the dump of the Epstein files. That is how I think Donald Trump deals with the British. It doesn't mean he's going to go out there and challenge King Charles to a duel. He's operating in a much more strategic and, in a certain sense, subtle way. So I think people just have to kind of cool their jets in terms of how you deal with an incredibly complex situation, where the president, while he's in office and while he does have the top people in his administrations, we know that, especially when it comes to the Justice Department, and the intelligence agencies, that is not yet penetrated down. He's working on that, and he needs more of you supporting him, as opposed to falling down every social media rabbit hole that hits you.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. Want to give a quick shout out to Melody Hart. Thank you, Melody, for joining us every week. We appreciate your support. You will learn more here than you ever imagined. Always welcome. We enjoy having you two here. And I'm going to take a quick question here from a super chat. Again, another repeat viewer. Thank you very much for joining us. Qatar has conquered the West. It's building infrastructure to restore the Islamic Empire. Dr. Udi Levy, former head of EWD and the Mossad, claimed at the IINC annual conference at Reichman University. What is being done? So Qatar conquering the West. Any comments?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is something quite different than that. Qatar has been a nasty element, as was Saudi Arabia, as was everybody else, that both the British and the United States were using to wage a strategic war on the flanks of Russia. Quite frankly, if you look at Afghanistan as a prime example of that, and all the stuff which went on around Osama bin Laden, we and the British were deliberately funding a form of Islamic fundamentalism or radicalism, which has not a whole lot to do with the actual belief of most Muslims. And these nation states were deployed as terrorists, and the whole region was set aflame in an ongoing religious war between this form of radical Islam funded by the intelligence agencies and what one might call revisionist Zionism, which is the kind of Jewish supremacist stuff that goes on with certain elements in Israel around the famous British intelligence figure of Jabotinsky. So, I don't think that Qatar is trying to build the Islamic Empire. I do believe that throughout the Arab part of the Middle East, there is a huge Arab renaissance going on. Turkey clearly has aspirations, and has had through Erdogan to rebuild the Islamic Empire. But more importantly, what's going on is a whole building boom within these societies by young people, young rulers. All of the people who are in the Abraham Accords were recruited by Jared Kushner because he did a listening tour at the start of the first Trump administration to actually find out what the thinking was in all of these places, to figure out how are we ever going to get this war ended, this religious war ended in this area. And what he found is that all of the younger rulers wanted vast reforms in Arab societies. And you may recall that the first trip that Trump took in his first presidency was to Saudi Arabia. And he brought in every single state. I don't think, Iran actually attended, but every single other Arab state. And his announcement was, we ain't doing terrorism anymore, folks. All right. In fact, we want to actually not have terrorism at all. We want this area to build. We want the young people in this area to actually use the oil resources to build up their economies. And that was the message he sent. Now, Qatar didn't get the message originally, and there was a whole big flap between Qatar and the rest of the people Trump was courting for the Abraham Accords. But that was settled. And now, right now, Qatar hosts the central command of our central command military, the biggest base in the Middle East, which is why Netanyahu bombing them was such a big deal and actually led to the present peace accords in the area. So that's where that's how I'd answer the question. You know, I don't think they're out to build a Islamic empire. And I think what you're going to see is a completely different dynamic in the area if this peace plan proceeds, which we should all be wholeheartedly rooting for it to succeed, because every aspect of it, you know, is being set up to fail. And you see the coverage this morning. Oh, this is so complex. It can't happen. It's going to screw up. Basically, Hamas wants revisions. All this stuff is designed to screw it up because the whole British play in this area is permanent religious warfare, exactly to prevent any nationalist state from emerging, which doesn't engage in religious war, but which develops for its own population. So it's a complicated question, but that's really the way I'd answer it.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Okay, quick intermission here. If you've been watching this and enjoying our show so far, please just hit the like button. It sends a massive positive signal to YouTube and helps our video get syndicated out to a wider audience. I'd like to thank Bill Vickers. I asked him for a question and didn't have one, but thank you very much from up north. We really appreciate your support. Thank you for coming and joining us every Thursday. And we do this show every Thursday. We take questions primarily from our newsletter subscribers. We do one live broadcast a week every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we do 3 political updates a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So if you want to follow us and see our next political update, which will be on Saturday, please subscribe to our channel. And if you're watching and enjoying, I see we have about 1,600 concurrent viewers. Please just hit the like button. It helps us reach a wider audience. Okay, so the next question is going to be about Argentina and Javier Milei. Okay. Very interested in your thoughts of Trump's commitment of financial support for Argentina. Milei's in trouble. So what's the risk that he could fail, and how would it impact the image of the United States in South America? Thank you very much, Meryl, for your question. I open up for comment.
Barbara, you're muted.
Obviously, Trump has a strategy, a security strategy, which puts us back squarely in our own hemisphere, something that we more or less really abandoned during the last decades, so to speak. And Milei is confronting in Argentina the entire sort of history of Peronism, central planning, and also the ongoing kind of influence of China in the Southern Hemisphere. Trump's idea, I believe, from watching the way he's emerging and from the security strategy, which is presently underway, the security strategy review in the Pentagon, is that we want to establish a, basic new Monroe Doctrine, if you will, that essentially says we're going to develop South America and we're going to develop the North and we're going to develop the Arctic. And that's going to be the primary way we're focused along with the homeland, rather than these, extraordinary attempts to be the new British Empire throughout the entire world, which is bankrupting us and which we can't sustain. So I think part of it is, Milei inherited an economy which is very difficult to manage. And what Trump is looking for is, how do we establish a beachhead in South America again, which is not really very much in present format on the side of the United States. We've had a horrible policy there for years. And, with the exception of Mexico, many of the countries have turned away from us precisely because of those horrible, very exploitative policies. It wasn't that way when we had the Bretton Woods system. South America was really a full participant in the idea that we're going to use our economic largesse after World War II to establish a trading relationship in which we develop all of these areas. Instead, Wall Street gave it over to the drug lords and the City of London in many respects, and it's a mess. So that's what Trump is trying to begin to write here.
Thank you. So I'm already getting a question about my shirt. So I'm here. Let me put on the link here. So I think YouTube now should put it up in the stream. The links in the description. But I have this MAGA 2028 T-shirt here. It's printed on a heavyweight tee for the winter, for fall and winter that's coming up here in the Northern Hemisphere. You can get it. This is going to draw a lot of attention. All right. It's actually brighter in person than it is over the thing, over video here. But you can get your own one. Links in the description, and I believe YouTube should put up a little shopping link if you're on TV or on a supported platform. Okay, so I'm going to take another quick question from our friend Dognose, who I believe I was in email contact with this week. And he just sent in a quick question here. Can you do a brief explanation of Jacobin as you have used it?
Okay, I mean, very quickly. The Jacobin mobs were what was used by British intelligence to subvert the potential that the French Revolution would become an American Revolution. The British obviously lost the colonies in the American Revolution, and then they saw that the ideas embodied in our fight were beginning to spread. France was the obvious next place. General Lafayette, who had been with Washington and Alexander Hamilton in our revolution, was in France working with other layers to begin to move France in the direction of an American Revolution. And to make a long story short, just like Antifa today or George Soros funded insurrectionists, the British created mobs in France that were called Jacobin mobs. And that's what was used to cut short the potential of an American Revolution in France, turn it into a bloody terror, and then ultimately lead to a dictatorship under Napoleon. That's right out of their playbook.
Alrighty, let's move on to the next question. Actually, quick thing here. Thank you very much, Beverly. Thank you for joining us every week. We appreciate having you in the audience. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question, which is going to be one that a lot of people, I think, have on their minds. Why does Congress vote along party lines? It seems to go against their duty to work for the best interests of all U.S. citizens. That's right. And even though you're elected by a particular part of the country, you are supposed to represent the entire United States. That's correct, not their party. Thank you very much, Paul, for your question.
All right. Thank you, Paul. This one's near and dear to my heart. Look, the question of party is something obviously even George Washington warned against. Running your economy from the standpoint of parties, as you say, as opposed to the interests of the United States, is the basis of parliamentary systems. That's how all of the European parliamentary systems work. You can just look at the British as the premier example. First, you vote for a party in an election, and the party that wins chooses the prime minister. You're not voting for an individual, you're voting for a party. Woodrow Wilson, my least favorite president of the United States, proposed a British parliamentary system for the United States back in the 19th century. We've never adopted that formally, but obviously parties have played a major role in the United States. And I think for the moment, we're kind of stuck with them as an institutional form. You know, in many states, like the state I'm in Michigan, you literally can't get on the ballot unless you get on as a recognized party. It's like 5 times more difficult to get on if you want to run as an independent. Not that there isn't something going on here that might actually put an independent on the ballot. But that being said, you know, it's kind of baked into our system at this point. I think the solution is really what Donald Trump is doing. He's created a movement. It's the MAGA movement. And that movement is in the process of capturing one of the parties. So that the importance of the MAGA movement, I think, has to transcend the particular political power of the parties. And of course, it's a battle throughout the country, broken down state by state, how much the MAGA movement runs the Republican Party. It's different everywhere in the country. It's an ongoing battle. And I think the only way to deal with the fact that, again, this question of parties is kind of baked into our system, and it's going to take a while to untangle this sweater, is we just have to continue to build the power of the MAGA movement. So it's what's calling the shots. And it can both direct the Republican Party to do what Donald Trump wants and pull more and more people from the Democratic Party and from independents into the movement. Now, some of them are switching and actually becoming Republicans, but I think it's always important to recognize the people who are switching, they're not becoming Republicans. They're becoming part of the MAGA movement.
Thank you, Susan. All right, let's move to the next question on Social Security. For many years now, the Social Security trustees have been telling us that they will start running out of money in 2034. All of a sudden, now it's 2033. What happened? Are they incompetent? Does Congress care or even curious? My congressman chooses not to answer any of my questions to my satisfaction. My congressman is Joe Morrell. Thank you, David, for your question and comment.
I don't think we can get into that in a whole lot of detail. You just got to think about how Social Security works, which is to the extent that more and more people are working and are paying the Social Security tax, then you avoid a lot of the problems which have occurred around a static workforce or a shrinking workforce, and therefore a shrinking Social Security fund. It's a dynamic process. And Congress has also, prior to Trump, repeatedly borrowed from the Social Security Trust Fund to fund other things than Social Security. That's now being stopped. So they keep doing this stuff because there's a major effort by Wall Street and others to basically say, really what should happen with Social Security is that people would have a lot more funding for their old age if Social Security were privatized, and if we got out of this and Wall Street actually ran these things as funds instead. That's been the move of the panic around Social Security for a long time. There are problems, no doubt, to the extent that the boomers hit all at once. And the economy doesn't feed enough younger workers into the framework because we're in a kind of demographic collapse. That ultimately will doom the Social Security Trust Fund because of the way it works if we don't actually have the type of economic renaissance that Donald Trump's talking about. So it's kind of a dynamic thing of all of these factors being, interrelated.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, quick intermission here. I see we have more people joining us. Thank you very much for joining us. We do the show every Thursday morning. We primarily take questions from our newsletter subscribers, but I have 2 more super chats here to get to. So we're also taking questions from the YouTube chat. I see we have about 1,900 people. Please like this video. It really helps us reach a wider audience on YouTube. And we do 3 political updates a week plus this live show. So we do 4 shows a week on YouTube. Please subscribe and don't miss the next one. Our next show after this live one is going to be on Saturday morning, delivered by Barbara Boyd. Okay, so I'm going to take a question that Susan and I were discussing right before the show. It came up in the chat, in a super chat, so I'm going to take it now because she said she wanted to address this question. So this comes in from Carl Centers. I live in Metro Detroit. It seems that Arabs own every gas station, car wash store in 50 miles of Detroit. Dearborn is entirely taken over. Why is this possible, and is anything being done about it? Thank you very much, Carl, for your question.
Look, if you cycled back a bunch of years, you'd probably say the same thing about the Poles, or you'd say the same thing about the Irish, or you'd say the same thing about any other demographic group. There was a massive wave in the 1950s and the 60s of Arab and Muslim Americans into Michigan to work in the auto industry, just like there was a massive wave of people from Appalachia to work into the auto industry. And, the more recent wave, as you represent, a lot of those gas stations are run, by the way, by Chaldeans who are Christians. But I think what is happening right now is, I want to take a step back when I answer this question. By the way, I live in the Detroit area. I live right next door to Dearborn. I think it's important for people to think about what Donald Trump did, the kind of broad coalition that Donald Trump pulled together to win the 2024 elections. It was a coalition which was driven not by people's ethnic identities. It was a coalition which was driven by people who believe in the American idea that you should be able to work hard, progress, and know that your children are going to have a better life than you did, which is why the auto industry historically has been such a draw until NAFTA, of bringing people of diverse ethnic groups into the Detroit area. And some are more dominant at some times than they are at other times in terms of this kind of American idea. Now, stop and think about what's happening right now, especially on social media, but it's more broadly. Part of you are being told we have to be freaked out about the Muslims and the Arabs. Another part of you is being told we have to be freaked out about the Jews. Actually, maybe in some of your minds, you're being freaked out about both. These are British operations to get you to forget what Donald Trump is doing. And this fixation on Dearborn right now is being deliberately played up. Now, the current mayor of Dearborn, Hamoud, is part of whipping it up. And he made some outrageous statements about a month and a half ago because somebody complained about a street being renamed after an Arab figure, a Muslim figure in the area. And the mayor basically told this person, if you don't like it, move out of Dearborn. We don't need people like you here. Now, guess what? The media went to town on this, that there's a jihad against non-Muslims in Dearborn and so on. Well, here's 2 things that they aren't telling you. There's actually a mayor's race right now in Dearborn. And there is a pro-Trump, although he's running as an independent, running nonpartisan as you have to do. But you have a pro-MAGA Republican Muslim leader from Yemen who is running for mayor to challenge this radical left-wing current Muslim mayor. So, the idea that, everybody is the same. Every Jewish person is a revisionist Zionist who believes in the superiority of the Jewish race and wants to kill all the Palestinians. That's all the Jews. All Muslims want to wipe out Western civilization and establish a caliphate in the United States. That's what the British want you to think, so that you can be manipulated in your emotions. Now, what I have up on the screen here is the fact, and somebody had asked this, it's a question we'll sort of take in the context of this right now. Can I review what I said last week in terms of how Arab and Muslim Americans ensured that Donald Trump won Michigan in 2024? Here's a headline from CBS News. Arab American voters helped Trump win Michigan. What will his presidency bring? And then I want to share the next one. This is from the local Detroit Free Press. Donald Trump wins Dearborn in 2024 presidential race thanks to Arab American and Muslim voters. And what happened in Dearborn, which is where all of this is being focused on, is Biden won 82% of the Muslim, Arab, and of the Dearborn vote in 2020. Kamala Harris only won 23%. Donald Trump won 42%. And that's very interesting. He didn't win the majority because there was a third-party candidate, a lefty independent, Jill Stein. So the 42% that voted for Donald Trump, they weren't just rejecting the Democrats. They could have voted for the independent. They voted for Donald Trump. 40% in the heavily Muslim Arab areas voted for Donald Trump, not against somebody else. Now, there has been a concerted effort by the British to now reignite, frankly, religious warfare in the United States. And again, you're getting it from the standpoint of all Jews are bad and they run everything, and all Muslims are bad and they want to establish a caliphate and kill all Christians. I mean, people, cut it out. Think like Americans. Think like Donald Trump. Yeah, obviously, there are Soros-run enemy operations being run through the Muslim community, just like they've been run on the other side, like with the Anti-Defamation League, which the FBI just cut ties with. So the Trump administration is thinking on a much higher level. And again, I hope that through the dialogues that people have with us, they begin to think more like Donald Trump and less like victims of clickbait.
Thank you very much, Susan. I want to give a quick shout out to Beverly Adams here. We'll take your question next. A quick intermission. If you're joining us for the first time, this is our live question and answer show. We do this every Thursday at 11 a.m. If you're interested in asking a question, I urge you to get our free newsletter. You can go to prom.ac or just search the web for Promethean Action. The link is also in the description. We do a daily newsletter. We send you updates when we post new videos on YouTube. We'll send you updates when we go live. We do 2 question and answer shows over Zoom. So we do other shows that are Zoom only, which are much more private and intimate. So if you want to get notifications about all that, please get our free newsletter. Link is in the description or directions are there. Also, please like this video. I see we have about 2,100 people watching. If you've been enjoying this so far, please just give us a quick like. It definitely sends a positive signal to YouTube. And subscribe. Our next political briefing will be on Saturday. So if you want to get, YouTube should send you a notification. Please subscribe. You'll get notifications when we do our next political briefing on Saturday. Okay, so back to Beverly's comment here. A show of support. Trump walked in front of the Queen on 6/6/19, the 75th anniversary of Normandy. The move towards freedom for the whole world started then. Thank you very much, Beverly, for the comment. Okay, we collected like 60 questions this week. We're only on we're going to go through the next few are going to be on digital currencies. So let's go through those. So digital currency questions. The dominance of the outdated SWIFT international banking payment systems should come to an end. The installation of the modern and efficient international banking system, crypto financial payment platform is the future. President Trump is very pro-digital currency and is leading the world in promoting such. What steps has the Trump administration taken care to promote the removal of such an antiquated SWIFT system and the promotion of a much more efficient and less corrupt systems such as the crypto financial payment platform? This will be one more step in the removal of the tyrannical financial grip and the trade and transport system of the archaic British financial culture and dominance. Thank you, Michael. Does intend to move or wash out, devalue the staggering debt through crypto and transition our economy into a crypto decentralized economy? I think, does Trump intend? Okay, thank you, Robert. The biggest news this week concerns the newly required digital ID. Many countries in the EU. Clearly, this is a first step toward implementing a central bank digital currency. The topic is advanced further by Catherine August Fitz of the Solari Report, who insists that Trump is leading us in the same dystopian direction, using more subtle tactics such as stablecoin systems. You have briefly alluded to this in the past, but can you please go into depth dispelling this myth and what Trump is doing to fight this trend? Thank you, Kaki. And there has been discussion about former President Trump's stated plans to challenge or dismantle the British-rooted financial system. In your view, does his vision incorporate elements of the much talked about NESRA and JESRA, or is it a separate path towards a new financial framework? Thank you very much again, Michael. I open the floor for responses.
Barbara, why don't you take the first part and I'll take this last one.
I want to just summarize it kind of in a couple of points. One is that Trump is absolutely committed to not having the digital currency surveillance state type of mechanics prevail, such as what's going on right now in Europe. The idea of actually using a central bank digital currency, period. Two, he's very much attacking directly the core element of the central banking system, i.e. going after the Fed and actually limiting its role. Number three, in terms of the real economy, what people keep focusing on is different forms of money. All right, when you think about it, crypto is just a different form of exchange. All right, what people are not focused on, which is the most important thing, is what are we exchanging? What are we producing? And how are we going to actually create the basis for an economy which is constantly producing real goods which actually benefit human beings at higher and higher levels of productivity and fulfilling our mandate in this universe to go forth, multiply, and subdue the earth. That's the center of Trump's policy. The means of exchange which will be used is really secondary. You know, as Trump himself put it, and as Scott Bessent put it, you know, Trump asked me, tell me, the reason why I have you here is I know I'm coming into a really crazy overall economy, which could crash because of what Biden did at any point. How do we actually deal with the debt and avoid crashing the economy? Clearly, I think the strategy which Bessent is pursuing is still very much along the lines of let's actually get real production going at the same time as we kind of inflate our way out of the debt, or at least that's the Federal Reserve's policy at this point. You know, we're still dealing with what happened in 2008. You know, and people got to realize that most of the debt overhang here is caused by the 2008 collapse of the entire system worldwide, which is called the 2008 financial crisis. In reality, it was a complete financial collapse of the entire system. And second, the kind of disruption which was caused by COVID. So, you know, I think crypto and other things are very interesting. But again, it's a means of exchange. It's not the heart of the matter, which is how do we have an economy which actually produces things and, you know, creates a future for our younger people so that, you know, we get out of all sorts of other factors which are really, really important, like We're in a demographic collapse. We just talked about what will happen to Social Security unless people start, having some confidence that they can form families, have kids, which really changes your entire culture all at once, and go on to do things like conquer space, which will spin off all kinds of new and revolutionary forms of technology. That's what we used to be about. And I think that the conversation is tilted far too much in the area of money and what's the kind of exchange we're going to use, as opposed to the real question, which is how do we actually get sustained productivity going in our economy. So that's how I'd answer your question.
Yeah, I'll briefly deal with NESARA, the National Economic Security and Recovery Act. It doesn't exist. This is a obviously very successfully launched intelligence mind operation against a whole lot of Americans. It's been around for over 20 years. I had a number of people that I was in touch with in previous decades who would literally call me every month or every couple months and say, it's going into effect tomorrow. So they're going to be raiding they're going to be taking shutting down the Federal Reserve. They're going to be doing this. They're going to be doing this. It's extremely elaborate, this hoax. It's drawn a lot of people into its orbit. And it is nothing more than that. And it's basically a way of saying to people, you don't have to do anything. You can just wait for, the tooth fairy to show up and fix everything. So I hope this is the last time we have to address this. I frankly thought that it had disappeared, and then now it's back again, in the public, or at least in the world of social media. Get your head out of the rabbit hole. Get out there, learn actual American system economics. Recognize that the only way we're going to save the economy is if you master these policies. You recruit candidates who understand the American system of political economy. You fight like hell to make sure that they get elected, like we did with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and others. And we keep fighting to broaden the understanding of how do you actually run the economy, rather than telling me every couple of months, the tooth fairy is coming tonight.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, we're definitely not going to be able to get through all the questions we have today. Barbara's freaking out. Don't worry, Barbara. We're not going to get to all the questions, but I'm going to hit it. I have a list of topics here that we're going to get through. The next set of topics is going to be about election integrity, which again is another question that's coming up as we move closer to the next election. Actually, before we get to that one, we have one about Russia and Kirill Dmitriev. Do you know Kirill Dmitriev? He is very active on X and very positive towards the U.S. and as special envoy to Putin. I feel like Russia has been demonized. Russian nation leans more Christian than ever. In the U.S., and they haven't even had mass migration, so it almost seems safer sans Ukrainian war. I also have heard that they were forced into this war because of Ukraine and the deep state, of course. If I had to flee to the United States, I think I would move to Russia. Am I way off base? Thank you, Lene. Yeah, maybe you'd want to consider, I'd say maybe consider that, but I'm going to open the comments to Barbara and Susan now.
I think we should win in the USA and not think about where we'd go if we lose. I think that's kind of the attitude we have to have. Kirill Dmitriev is a very interesting figure. He's very close to Vladimir Putin. He plays a major role in Russian intellectual life, and he's been the primary commentator pushing forward the rapprochement between Russia and the United States on social media. And yes, Russia has been totally demonized by the British. That's been going on for centuries. And we have to work our way out of it and actually understand it a whole lot better. And it's a key battle in the battle for our nation to actually get this relationship righted. So that's how I would answer your question.
Yeah, and I just add one other thing, which almost cycles back to the last question. He's also the head of Russia's, I believe it's called their Sovereign Wealth Fund, but he's the head of a major investment fund in Russia, which is a very important institution and the kind of thing more people should be thinking about rather than tooth fairies, which is what are the actual institutions that you need to set up so that you're directing more credit into your economy? Are they going to be institutions, as our administration is also talking about, possibly setting up a sovereign wealth fund? Are we going to have to reform the Federal Reserve? We certainly are. At least reform it, if not replace it with actual national banking. So the fact that Dmitriev has that kind of position in Russia, and that he really is one of the major interlocutors with Rubio, with Scott Bessent, and others, in terms of these kinds of institutions moving the economy more and more toward this kind of economic development is, I think, extremely important. He is interesting. He posts some really fun stuff on X, so people might want to follow him as that questioner is.
Thank you very much, Susan and Barbara. Okay, the next set of questions are going to be on election integrity. And in my view, all of this talk about the midterms is pointless unless we fix the election. Election integrity is foundational to everything. There has been some cleanup of voter rolls and a handful of arrests. Personally, I advocate for a special counsel of election integrity, and all they need to do is follow the money mapped by Doge and ActBlue. About 31 states still have Smartmatic Dominion machines, so elections are not secure. Most of these are blue states, but Georgia elections are corrupt since Kemp and this SOS are former lobbyists for Dominion. In 2024 alone saw at least 20 seats in the House and 4 Senate seats stolen and 4 million votes added to the popular vote totals. Why is not a grand scale election cleanup underway to fix this once and for all? Tired of hearing about let's make it too big to rig, where we just accept that any close race will be stolen by Dem operatives and nothing else will be done. 2020 was obvious, but 2024 was also in-your-face cheating, so to be able to control Trump. Thank you, Ed H. from Raleigh. And this one's from Jay. If the presidential election is proven to have been stolen, would that nullify all appointed officials and laws that were enacted under Biden? Thank you very much, Jay, for your question.
Barbara, why don't you take the first one and I'll take the other?
I think there's an assumption there about too big to rig, which I want to hit on. Too big to rig means that basically what you're doing is you're creating a coalition which is much more powerful than the really treasonous Democratic Party at this point is. If we continue to be close, all right, i.e. that the Democrats with their policies right now, which have nothing to do with the traditional Democratic Party, keep closing close to what the Republicans are capable of getting, that says something really horrible about our present country. And so, you know, my overall political orientation is, yes, election integrity is foundational. I don't have any idea that this is not really being worked on. I don't think that my own view is that I'm a mail-in ballot person rather than a machine person. Yes, machines can be rigged. They're awful. But where I think the 2020 election came down is in the mail-in ballot fraud. And Susan can correct me. It's not an issue that I follow as closely as I should. She does. But, you know, I think there's an awful lot going on in terms of cleaning up the voter rolls and in terms of ensuring that that type of fraud doesn't occur again. With respect to the machines and getting paper ballots, you know, what Trump wants is clearly that. He signed an executive order to that effect. But he's got to actually get that implemented in the states, which is where citizens actually come in. All right. The states run elections. Citizens have to mobilize and organize for this. The president can sign executive orders all he wants, but he can't really, change what states do, because that's how our Constitution sets up the authority for the most part on elections. And so it's up to people to organize that in their states and to do so with a passion to actually ensure that we have safe and honest elections. So that's how I'd answer the question.
Yeah, and I'd specifically point to a couple of things that Ed raises. Some of the things that you raise are being done by this administration right now. Or Congress. There's a congressional, Jim Jordan is looking at the way Act Blue has functioned. The Trump Justice Department has subpoenaed the voter rolls from key swing states, including mine here in Michigan, where we have one of the most horrific situations. We have a batshit crazy attorney general and secretary of state. The secretary of state is running for governor right now. We have the worst. I mean, I'll challenge anybody from any other state. Well, maybe I'll concede my friends in California. We are among the 5 worst states in the United States of America in terms of election integrity because of what we have at the top. Now, what we have now is something above the top, which is a Donald Trump Justice Department that wants to clean this up. What we have at the bottom is a very robust grassroots election integrity operation in this state. It takes a huge amount of work to run a successful election integrity operation. It's not something that, you just, again, wave a magic wand. You need hundreds of people, in a voting district, thousands of people to be poll watchers, to do the work to clean the rolls, to work with the local clerks and so on, to know the law, to work with your state legislatures. This is a whole of society operation. And, people say, well, what's the point until we get election integrity? Well, my point is, are you helping locally in terms of your own election integrity operation? Do you recognize that this administration is doing a hell of a lot? And third, please, this idea of I'm tired of hearing too big to rig. Donald Trump is president of the United States, and we have the possibility of actually saving civilization because he is so, because we ran this campaign on the basis of too big to rig. And again, I'll come back to Michigan, one of the worst election integrity situations in the country because of the current leadership of the state. And we still took it for Donald Trump. And the reason we didn't take it in a lot of other elections, the candidates were not up to snuff. The candidates did not run Donald Trump campaigns. And so they bled votes. And if they had run the kind of campaign that Donald Trump was running, he'd have a bigger margin than he is. And some of those candidates happily have learned their lesson and are running a very different campaign in 2026.
Thank you, Susan and Barbara. Okay, we have some more super chats. I want to give a shout out to Tricky Vicky. I'd like to see the Fed and every other anti-constitutional and retroactive to 1913 and all of our money clawed back. There's your net Nasara or whatever it is. Thank you, Tricky Vicky. Make sure you join us next week. Make sure you're liked and subscribe and get our free newsletter. Thank you for your support. I have one from BW. Thank you, BW, for joining us again. I hope the SCOTUS outlaws race districts and red states hurry up with the redistricting before midterm. I think we all agree with you here. Barbara, any comments? You know anything about this?
Yeah, there's a big case, pending before the Supreme Court, which is going to have a major impact on this in terms of one person, one vote and racial gerrymandering. And, that's really at the heart of all of this redistricting because, people are fleeing blue states and moving to red states. And you just take California, if you did the census right now as the basis for, drawing the maps, which Newsom clearly hasn't done, you would lose congressional seats in California. You'd lose congressional seats in Illinois. You'd lose, the Democratic Party would be up the creek in many respects if it was really based on what population actually is in these various states at this point. So we're all behind the redistricting fight. And in fact, I'll be publishing shortly a piece about that on the second Promethean PAC bulletin for the midterms, particularly focused on Prop 50 in California and defeating Newsom's attempt to screw Californians out of any MAGA representation at all. And that's really what's up there. And it's important because, you have a 3-vote potential majority in the House at this point in time, which means you're not going to get policies which are favorable to Trump. You have a Senate which, for him to actually implement his program legislatively, you need 60 people to beat the filibuster. And the Republican Senatorial Committee is just focused on maybe we can add a couple more. All right. When you still got people like, Lisa Murkowski and, our friend from Maine, Collins, actually blocking key Trump appointments. And you have a whole McConnell senatorial faction, which is still fighting the forever wars of George Bush. So, that's the situation. And, people need to recognize that we won through an arduous process in 2024, but these midterms are going to be a bear if people sit by the sidelines as they traditionally do. And we've got to actually have even a more substantive victory in 2026 to secure what the president is doing. So that's my pitch.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, we have a few more quick super chat shout outs here. I want to give a shout out to Miss Stang. Thank you from our friends up north. The talking out of the sides of the mouth from the left to the right. And I forget the name of the song. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am stuck in the middle with you. Yes, it's.
That song. Now
you got an earworm from that
one.
Head. Thank you very much, Miss Stang. And Tricky Vicky, I am always here routinely, heavily shadow banned. Okay. Maybe you're a little bit right on that. Now I have it set to the mode where YouTube is supposedly showing me all the live chats, and I don't see you come up here a lot. So I know what happens, unfortunately, is that YouTube decides who shows up in the chat and who doesn't. People don't realize administrators don't have that much control. And people say all the time they're shadow banned. I promise you, if you're not saying anything really outrageously stupid in a chat, I'm not shadow banning you, but I can't tell you what YouTube is doing behind the scenes. But thank you, Tricky Vicky, for the support. We really appreciate it. And another shout out from Amy. Thank you very much, Amy, for your support. We really appreciate all the super chats everyone have been sending in. It means the most. It means the most. We're 100% viewer and reader supported, so we don't have any corporate sponsors or anything like that. Okay, the next set of questions are going to be about political organizing, which is especially important in the light of what's happened with Charlie Kirk, which is the way this set of questions is going to begin. What can we do as individual Americans to continue carrying Charlie Kirk's mission and message? Okay, next, thank you, Neil. Do you guys have a chapter in Pennsylvania? Thank you, Bill. We're going to answer that in a second. What can I do to help with this movement? Okay, I just got somebody sent in an email right before this. I took these questions asking the same thing. What can I do to help this movement? I am just a common working person with limited time and resources, but I do enjoy your content immensely. Thank you very much, Ron. And the last one in this little set. No. Let's take those three. Asking about what can people do and carrying on Charlie Kirk's mission and message. Do we have a chapter in Pennsylvania? And what can common working people do with limited time and access that do enjoy our content? How do they get involved with us?
Barbara, you want to address the first one?
Well, in terms of carrying forward Charlie's message, his message was that we should basically talk to people who are our opponents and attempt to change their minds. We shouldn't basically just be out there saying, you're brainwashed and, basically there's no basis upon which we can come to an agreement. And the way that you learn how to do that is, and it's the reason why I think Charlie was actually assassinated, is he was like a modern Socrates. He was dedicated to going out and actually listening to what it was that people were saying, recognizing that particularly young people in our country have been deprived of any form of education, which would allow them to orient themselves in this very, dynamic political environment we're in. And he wanted to solve that problem by actually giving to people as almost a good Samaritan in his actual framework. So the thing you got to do is think about what it takes to actually do that. What he had major points. He said, go to church, revisit the Bible, marry someone, have a family, and have more kids than you could afford. That was the basic message in terms of talking to people about what the optimism is that exists in every human being. And that's what he was trying to draw out from people out of this very kind of, disgusting social media environment we're in, where people get pigeonholed and think they've got to defend certain kinds of belief systems, which if they actually sat back and had a dialogue and examined them, they'd probably come to a different conclusion about a lot of things and find out that the media they're listening to, for the most part, has nothing to do with reality. And I include social media in that description. So, that's what it's an individual commitment, just like he had, which you're talking about in terms of carrying forward his message. Turning point is recruiting. We obviously have a vast interest at Promethean Action and Promethean PAC in recruiting young people and actually providing the type of grounding in history and culture of the real United States, which is not accessible to people. So, that kind of social process is really what you're talking about.
To the next one. We don't have an on-the-ground chapter in Pennsylvania, but we are in touch with people who are both active in the Republican Party and in other grassroots movements in Pennsylvania. What I recommend to everybody, and including the question in the next question, is if you want to get active with us, whether we're on the ground or not in your state, just reply to any of the emails from Promethean Action with your name, your location, and contact information. And we will reach out to you and figure out how we can best collaborate. Just so people have a sense, we do have very active on-the-ground operations in Michigan, Texas, California, and Washington State. But we're in touch with political activists almost everywhere throughout the United States. We also do live Zooms in various regions, so that if you're not immediately next door to us in Michigan or Texas, but you're in part of the environment where we're organizing in other states, you can get on a Zoom and interact with other people, in many cases from your state. So I would just say, if anybody wants to be active with us, just reach out to us, and a live human being will actually get back to you and discuss that. Now, that being said, I wanted to, once again, Adam, share the screen. And, we're going to go to our Promethean PAC part of this show. As some of you know, and perhaps newer watchers don't, we have two organizations. We have Promethean Action, which is our policy arm, which hosts these calls. Barbara is the treasurer for our political action arm, the Promethean PAC, Promethean Political Action Committee, which is a registered PAC under the Federal Election Commission here in the United States. If you're an American citizen or a permanent resident, you can help directly with the PAC. And the way that people can help the most is to get our new half-page flyer, which addresses the question of the midterm elections. This is what the flyer looks like. It addresses the fact that this Trump's new Republican Party, thank you, Adam is holding it up. I've got mine here too. It addresses the fact of what I said a little bit earlier. Trump has created a movement. This is not a party, but it's capturing the Republican Party, and the new Republican Party becomes the basis for winning the midterm elections if people are focused on Trump's actual policies. This is the front side of the half pager. And if you look at Adam and I are both pointing, you can get it by going to the links there. The backside of this half pager gives you the content of what differentiates Donald Trump's policies from everybody else. The crazy Democrats, the old Wall Street war wing of the Republican Party, we call it the Uniparty. You can get copies of this by going to that link. And you can get 100 copies, you can get 1,000 copies. You can download a printable version, printer-friendly version yourself. Although I think the color copies are terrific and much more effective when you're out organizing, when you're at a farmer's market, when you're at a political event, when you're talking to your political family members, or even some of your family members who are starting to maybe rethink but don't quite actually understand what's going on. This is, I think, a vital tool. We've had feedback from organizers and people who are using this around the country. They've asked us for other things, like a half-page flyer that explains the difference between the American system and the British system. We hear you. Everybody who's organizing, who's got suggestions in terms of how we can improve or do something in addition to this half-page flyer as we go into the hot phase of the midterms, get in touch with us. Like I said, we're real live people. We'll get back in touch with you.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, we just set up new software to manage all the incoming requests and questions that we get now. So all you have to do to reach one of us is just send an email, reply to any Promethean Action or Promethean Pact email, and you'll come right into our new incoming contact management system. So we'll be able to reach out much more efficiently moving forward. Okay, thank you. Let me just do a quick recap here. If you're just joining us or have joined us recently, my name is Adam with Promethean Action. I'm a producer and editor. I'm joined with Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd. We do a live question and answer show every Thursday starting at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thank you for stopping by and watching us. We also do 3 political updates a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Please subscribe to this channel. We're going to be doing another political update on Saturday with Barbara Boyd. That comes out at around noontime Eastern time in the United States. So subscribe to this channel. And I see we have about 1,700 people. Please like this video if you're watching and are enjoying this content. Okay, the next question that we have from our email newsletter is going to be back on the issue of the British Empire. Thank you so much for being the light we need today. Make sense this history of the British and Anglo-Dutch empires. What would you recommend we do to reassure Republicans gain seats in Congress in the next midterms? Thanks again, John, for your question.
Barbara, you want to talk about what you're doing with the PAC again?
Yeah, look, what we're doing right now is kind of like a saturation bombing of education principles. All right, principles for what Trump's doing in terms of what is this thing called the American system of economy? How is that actually different from what we've been living under, which is the Anglo-Dutch system, really since 1971, most emphatically. And the way that we're going to actually win the Congress is by educating people about these economic principles. And to be blunt, if the midterms roll around and the voting public doesn't feel like they are in a better situation economically than they were in 2024, and we haven't actually done something to improve the situations for people's incomes and everything else, then we're going to have trouble in the midterms. But it may be very well that if people are adequately educated to see where Trump is going with, energy, with, rebuilding the entire electrical grid, where he's going with actually, taking our agricultural sector and getting away from the cartels, what he's doing with, actually bringing manufacturing back from overseas so that we have, productive jobs which we can give to people, if people understand the directionality in their souls and their hearts, in a certain sense, the ability of the financiers to intervene and make a mess of things, which they're doing, you know, and the Fed to intervene and make a mess of things will not be such a factor. So our major impetus right now is that half-page flyer showing people in a very succinct way where all of these executive orders are actually going and what they're directed at. And, you know, you have to not just secure more Republican seats, you have to secure better quality Republicans. All right. So, you know, Trump has been able in this period to keep a very slim majority of Republicans in both houses in line somewhat on critical economic issues because of the power that he projected in November of 2024. All of those guys looked at this and they said, holy cow, I better not vote for Trump at this point, because he's got this population behind him. We have to keep that momentum going in the midterms, and we have to have educated the population to demand much, much more from their Republican congressmen and senators and be able to convince them of that. We're going to Washington next week. We'll be there. We'll be scouting things for you. We'll be sort of going through and meeting with a lot of congressmen. We'll be distributing literature. We're going to do a report for you as we come back of what we found, just with an on-the-ground assessment in terms of our policies and Trump's policies. What we find overall across the nation is that people don't understand fully the actual revolutionary nature of Trump's economic revolution because they're dependent on people who don't cover it at all, really. And we cover it here all the time. So that's what we're doing as the PAC for this period. We're going to do a bit of an intervention into California over the course of the next week for the November 4th, Newsom, we call it the Newsom referendum, the referendum which could, if we handle it right and he loses on the ability to redistrict, we could kill his presidential campaign, which would be a nice, kind of thing to think about doing. So that's what we're doing with the PAC, and I hope people get on board with it.
Adam, if you could share the screen again.
Oh, sorry. There you go.
Yeah, I just want to give people an idea of how we are intervening very, very directly. This is a picture from about 10 days ago. The Michigan Republican Party had its biannual policy conference, and Promethean Action had a table there. And I thank our supporters for allowing, to helping us with the resources so we can do things like this. Our table was ideally placed. There were, I don't know, between participants and others, there were probably 1,000 people cycling through here. All of the major candidates for 2026, governor, Congress, state legislatures, people are already lining up for these elections. And we had tremendous interaction with many of them. They came to our table, they got our literature, we had discussions with them, in terms of upping their game, in terms of understanding, especially Trump's economic policies and his peace through strength policies, with an emphasis on the peace part of it. And I personally had discussions with leading people running for office in Michigan, some of whom I'm pretty sure will actually end up becoming the Republican nominees, to make clear to them that they fell short in 2022 and they fell short in 2024 because they did not campaign like Donald Trump. So I encourage people, if you can find opportunities like this, candidates events, local Republican parties, local MAGA groups. As Barbara said, we need to create a higher caliber of candidates in the Republican Party so that not only do we get Republicans elected in 2026, they're MAGA Republicans.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, let's go through. We got some more super chats here from our friends that come every week. Another one from BW. Thank you, BW. Trump needs to do whatever is necessary to win legally. Did you see Eric Sewell promising to go after Trump allies? I'm worried about what they might do. Yeah, if we don't win this midterm, we're going to be in a little bit of we're going to be in the hot seat for sure. Any comments, ladies?
No, I think that's a clear statement.
You muted yourself, Adam.
Thank you. Jeff from Utah, best ever, ladies. Thank you, Jeff in Utah, for the support. Please make sure you like this video, subscribe, and consider getting our newsletter because you'll get all of our updates as we keep posting. Next one, again, is another regular viewer. Thank you, Alabama, USA. Thank you for your YouTube channel. Thank you for sharing this information. We are praying for you all from the powers that want this to stop. I agree with you. Thank you very much, Alabama. And let's just take this quick one here, again, from Amy. Me, again, hi, Amy. Can you please post how the Brits created radical Islam? Would you like to just comment on that real quick?
Yeah, Adam, could you basically just put in the chat or the description the book by Mark Curtis and the book by Bob Dreyfus, which I sent to you earlier. There are two books which give you the history starting way back when. One is by a former colleague of mine named Bob Dreyfus. It's called Devil's Game, and it deals with the United States and British support for radical Islam. The other is by Mark Curtis, who was a British historian who had access to the British Secret Intelligence archives about the entire history of the British Empire and radical Islam. It's called Secret Affairs.
All right, we're gonna put references after the show's done. I'll put those two books. You can see Mark Curtis, Secret Affairs, and Bob Dreyfus, Devil's Games. Those are the two books Barbara just referenced. I'll put those references in the description and on our website later so people can get the references for that. Okay, and last super chat for now. My father fought the Nazis in World War II. First off, thank you, Yvonne. Thank you for joining us every week. We really appreciate it. You have no idea how it hurt me when Netanyahu inferred Americans were Nazi and Trump said nothing. Address this, please, on behalf of positivity. Thank you, Yvonne, for the question.
I also gave Adam an article by Barak Ravid, which deals with the behind-the-scenes actual negotiations over the weekend and on Monday between Trump and Netanyahu. What you see publicly is not what's going on. All right, that's something people really need to understand. And the behind the scenes between Trump and Netanyahu went basically like this. Now, Barak Ravid is a very, very well sourced reporter concerning all that is going on in the Middle East and the Trump administration. He writes for Axios and he gets all of the straight stuff. And he also wrote an entire book about the Abraham Accords, which is extremely useful for people to read. It's called Trump's Peace by Barak Ravid, as to what actually went on. Very few people who are chatting away that they think they understand everything about this have ever bothered to read the book about what actually went on in the first Trump administration, which was revolutionary in terms of the Middle East. With respect to Netanyahu, Trump's strategy has always been to court the Israeli population and become more popular in Israel than Netanyahu is in Israel. That allows him to completely outflank Netanyahu. What he said with respect to what happened prior to Monday, and the actual behind-the-scenes conversations, according to Barak Ravid, went something like this. Netanyahu protesting, I don't want your deal. I know you're going behind my back. You've got all these Arab nations lined up behind it. I need to make all these modifications, etc. Trump to Bibi Netanyahu, I will walk the United States completely away from you if you do not take this deal. Okay, so that's what happens behind the scenes as opposed to the things you actually see in the theater for both domestic and foreign audiences, which occurs in a public event at the White House. And people should really pay attention to that kind of aspect of things, because I think that is a truthful account, having studied Trump's diplomacy during the whole previous administration and the Abraham Accords.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to go for about another 20 minutes. We get so many questions every week. We have to do a little bit of prioritization here. And I just want to give another quick shout out for my shirt. If you're interested, Promethean Action Shop has a special MAGA 2028 shirt available. This is great when you're trying to make a splash, when you're out in public trying to stir the pot a little bit. You will get eyeballs from this shirt, including a lot of compliments. I've gotten just as many Trump supporters walk up to me loving this shirt. I featured the product right now in the live stream. You might see a link for it pop up. If not, it's the pinned comment, and the link's also in the description if you want to get your own. So we're going to take the next question here, which is going to be on a potential crash. The worldwide debt is now 380 plus trillion. What is the likelihood of a worldwide credit crisis that would stymie commerce? By the way, thank you for all you are doing. Thank you, Mike, for your comment and question.
Well, you got to say, based on where we're coming from, that that's still a very real possibility, and we're working on it. And the first step in working on it is get the United States into shape. You can try and address it in many, many other ways. And Trump is, number one, get the United States producing again. Revamp the U.S. economy into a productive economy. Get peace in the world. That's the second priority of dealing with this. You are spending huge amounts of money on armaments, on war, on this, that, and the other thing by nation states which otherwise could be spending the money on their populations and producing things. It's the old, kind of argument for warfare weapons being made into plowshares. All right, that's what we need to do, and Trump is clearly doing. The third thing is revamp the world trading system so it ceases to be, essentially ripping off the United States of America and, favoring the globalists in terms of their control of the overall world economy. And Trump is working on that simultaneously. So he's doing everything possible, but we inherited a terrible situation. Again, it does go back to 2008, and that was a worldwide financial collapse in 2008. It does go back to COVID. Again, a shutdown of the entire world's economy and the disadvantage of an entire generation of young people by the shutdowns and craziness that went on there. But we're moving away from a system, the globalist system, which is really headed for a collapse. And the way we get out of this mess is to produce our way out of it. So that's clearly Trump's strategy, and the only strategy that's going to work.
Hi, yeah, really quick, Yvonne in the comments. Okay, so right now it's just a shirt. I also have stickers. You can buy like a little sticker. If you just follow the link for the shirt, you can go to our store. You'll see little stickers I'm also selling. I will also make a coffee cup with this design on it. I think a lot of people are like that don't want to stir the pot when they're out in public. Because this shirt, if you're in certain parts of this country, I'm telling you, this shirt is going to stir the pot. Okay, so yes, I will make the coffee cup. Just give me a few days on that. All right. Next one is on the House of Windsor. Do you think Harry is acting on behalf of the UK government as a foreign agent, considering his public comments on our elections, our First Amendment, and online censorship? Thank you for your question, Karen. I would probably say maybe not. Maybe he's not directly acting like it, but he certainly is.
Let's just say his entire personality right now and his criticisms of the United States are perfectly consistent with the British Empire.
Yep, especially when you look at it from the standpoint of the younger, the new leftist, the new left movement that's coming up, right? Okay. After the American Civil War ended, Lincoln had planned to initiate a war against the British beginning in Canada. Please discuss the facts and what may have happened if the British Empire hadn't killed Lincoln to stop the attack, to stop this attack on them. Lynn was always right. Thank you, John, for your question and comment. So what would have happened coming out if Lincoln had not been assassinated? One of the things is that probably the Transcontinental Railroad would have been even greater than it already was. I mean, the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which happened after Lincoln's death.
Susan, you want me to handle that?
Yeah, would have to refresh myself on that period of history.
Okay. Right. Well, I mean, obviously, the United States would have probably come together much, much faster. We wouldn't have had this heritage of the continuing battle between the North and the South. We probably would have had much more direct alliances with Russia, who supported us during the war. And we probably would have actually really confronted the British Empire much more directly based on the economy, which Lincoln had built up using American system policies to win the Civil War. So, you know, again, the reason for the assassination was, number one, the Confederacy was totally supported by the British Empire. All right. It was a war which was created by them. It wasn't some kind of nascent, you know, organic thing in the American South. It was King Cotton and the slaveocracy warring against the best aspects of our Constitution and our system. They lost that. And Lincoln very clearly knew the source of our problem from the conduct of the war. And so there's every reason to believe that he would have tried to extend the American system of economy, as you know, he was already doing, into Japan, into you know, Europe, and other ways, actually, you know, defeating the British overreach, which had created the war, and educating the population as to their true enemy. That's the only thing I think would have happened if he were allowed to carry forward the actual economic boom he had started.
Adam, could you share the screen? I'm just going to take advantage of that question because it addresses the assassination of Lincoln. And I will point out, in our police dossier, which is available both in our store and on our website, maybe Adam can post the toolkit link or something where people can find this. It points out that the assassination plot against Lincoln was run out of Canada. And it also deals with the McKinley and JFK assassinations and the attempts on Trump. And then fast forward to the 20th century, a big Canadian role as well in terms of the assassination attempt, the successful assassination against John Kennedy. So this is must reading.
Thank you, Susan. We just got another super chat from our friend Bill. Bill from up north, our friends, Canadian friends up north. Thank you very much for your support. Maybe get in contact with us if you're trying to organize. I don't know how much we can help you. Our political systems are different, but we'd love to be more in dialogue with you. Just send us an email. Thank you. Okay. And yeah, and if you want to get the pamphlet, you can just search the web for Promethean Action Toolkit. you'll find a page that has 2 of our latest ebook. We used to call them pamphlets, but really they're digital now, so we're just calling them ebooks. We have 2 of our ebooks. I think Susan's, yeah, so we have this one and the other one. You can go to it just by search Promethean Action Toolkit. Or if you go to our website, it's right in the menu. You'll see an option for Toolkit. So thank you very much, Bill, for your super chat. And we're going to take a few more questions here. We have about 10 minutes left or so. Next one is going to be about Ukraine, what's going on in Ukraine, because again, this is another question that everyone keeps asking us. Was it the Ukraine and UK sending out those drones on the various countries this weekend? Who is doing that? It seems like it is a push to get the US and NATO into the war. Well, there certainly is a push for that.
I think
Barbara?
the second question is, take the next question. It's similar.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. UK targeting Moscow with our weapons. Is this World War III?
It certainly is being pushed in that direction by the British. There's no question about it. Yesterday, the British Defense Minister came out and said that the objective of NATO must be to crush Crimea. And, you know, you've got all of this false flag stuff, which is really what it is. I mean, the Russians are denying that this is them. And, you know, my own research into the basis for this war, starting with the 2014 coup, is that there's all kinds of false flags in terms of setting it up for us to get involved in this war. Obviously, if Trump is dragged into this war somehow, either through some kind of drone attack, potentially, as Moscow is saying, on Romania and Poland, he loses a substantial part of his base who voted for him on the basis of ending this war. I think he's very much still absolutely dedicated to doing that. And you see a whole lot of nonsense coming from certain people, or apparent nonsense coming from certain people in the Trump administration. There's Keith Kellogg, who I call General Cornflake. There's a piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning saying that Trump has okayed giving advanced intelligence for strikes within Russia to the Ukrainians, although the United States would maintain a veto power over any such strikes. All of these things are clearly meant, in my view, to try and create the basis for Putin coming to the table. What he's trying to do is you know, actually deal, in my view, with his own population, which, you know, is having some difficulties at this point in terms of the continuation of this war. But you've got opposition in Russia to the idea of making a peace in this war. So it's a very complicated situation. And I wouldn't jump to conclusions about what's actually going on at this point, because we're bothered by the fog of war. Nobody is really telling us the truth about what the actual situation on the battleground is. I personally don't trust the intelligence the president is getting from the present CIA. I personally think that whatever Tulsi Gabbard has to say would have a lot more of my vote to being somewhat accurate. But we're dealing here with a situation in which we have relied, in my view, stupidly, on British intelligence for a lot of our intelligence information about this entire episode. So it's a very tense situation. I really hope that what the president is trying to do to end the war and bring President Putin to the negotiating table, along with curtailing the insane Europeans, which they are at this point, and the insane Ukrainians, which they are at this point, is going to work. But it is a very, very difficult situation.
Thank you. I just want to address a question. I have some, we had some people reach out recently who wanted to support our organization. I have a few people that want to help me do t-shirt designs. So I do have some more t-shirt designs in the work, some that are a little bit less in your face, that are more subtle. So just everyone hold on. We are going to have some more cool t-shirt designs, ones hopefully that focus specifically on the founding fathers. I hope to do a nice series of t-shirts with all of our founding fathers, like a whole series of them that people would want to wear. So that's thank you, Zach. Yeah. So that I am working on other designs. Yes. Okay. We're coming into the last like 6 minutes or so. Now we should have taken this question earlier. We're going to start programming these a little bit better, but the next question is about next set is about George Soros here. In 1992, George Soros orchestrated a highly profitable currency trade that led to the British pound's exit from the European exchange rate mechanism, the precursor to the European Central Bank. This involved our current Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. This move appeared to represent a power shift away from the City of London cabal in favor of the ERM, later the ECB. Did this amount to a shift away from the City of London's power control at the time? If not, can you provide some context that might explain your contention that all roads lead to the City of London? Thank you very much, Stephen, for your very astute question.
Susan referenced in her Wednesday brief a piece by Richard Poe, basically along the lines of how the British created George Soros. And what he has to say, which is a very interesting hypothesis, is that this was a move by the City of London against the Bank of England. And that basically the trade which occurred, yes, was very profitable to Soros, but he also says that it was that a very significant British journalist by the name of Lord Rhys Mogg actually did a whole fantasy narrative around this trade, which made George Soros famous for something that was actually orchestrated by Morgan Stanley and the Morgan interests, which have been traditionally British, including Morgan Guarantee of New York City. So if he's right, and I put some emphasis on that, Soros was really just a tool in an overall rearrangement of things being made by the British Empire, the City of London, in conjunction with the Queen. Lord Rhys Mogg was a direct confidant of Queen Elizabeth at the time. And it did involve Scott Bessent, but Scott Bessent wasn't really the key guy in Soros's firm around that particular transaction. And as I said before, it was primarily the City of London which joined Soros in doing this, which made the actual shorting of the pound extremely effective. So I think that's a very interesting hypothesis. In any event, it wasn't like somehow, George Soros as an individual is this mastermind out there who engineered a short sell on the pound to create this thing without backing from the overall City of London complex. So that's my answer to your question. And you can find the link to Richard Poe's very interesting take on that in Susan's video from Wednesday.
Thank you. I'd like to give a quick shout out to Paul Trainer, who is a friend from the UK. Thank you very much, Paul. Love your kitty there. Thank you for joining us again. We hope to see you next week. Please make sure you get our free newsletter. The link is in the description to get our newsletter. We send a daily newsletter. Okay, next question. Let me pick one here. Okay, I'm going to pick kind of a longer one here. This is a international question, so I think this might be a good one because we have a lot of international support here. Okay, hello everyone at Promethean Action. Most people know by now that every institution has been captured by a harmful, insane, woke ideology all over the West, which seems like it has been a deliberate weaponized strategy created from a particular think tank or institution. I understand the British imperial system is behind things overall, the monetary control and the psychological warfare. It's just hard to understand exactly who are the groups or the driving forces behind what. The people on the left want socialism and supposedly oppose capitalism, but then in Britain, we had a socialist Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who moved us towards globalism and has done so much harm to the working class, but himself became very rich through capitalism in the process. Yeah. That happens here in the United States too. Also, every Labour Prime Minister and other Labour members are members of the Fabian Society, and is the Fabian Society's Marxist ideology that is now deeply embedded in the British state. Yes, our organization previously wrote extensively on the Fabian Society. Obviously, America, Europe, and Australia and Canada also has Marxism deeply embedded in its institutions. I guess I'm asking, how did left and right come together in such a planned and terrifying way, and how can this be eradicated? Thank you very much, Anne, from across the pond. Again, a very excellent question for us to end on today.
Well, I'll start. I think by going to the very end, how did left and right come together in such a planned and terrifying way, and how can this be eradicated? It can be eradicated by recognizing that left and right are simply the opposite sides of the same view of man, which is that man is no better than an animal. The well springs of this go back to Aristotle, but you can take it much more directly in the more modern period to British philosophical liberalism. And what you'll find is just different iterations of the same idea, that we make our economic decisions purely from the standpoint of self-interest, purely from the standpoint of, feeding our various kinds of appetites and so on. And that really is the basis of both left-wing ideologies and right-wing ideologies. I might mention that there's a recent piece, I believe, in The Atlantic, an interview with Cass Sunstein, who was one of Barack Obama's evil advisors, one of the key people behind Obamacare and so on, and who has this basic underlying idea that you simply manipulate people based on their emotions, based on their passions, and so on. In this interview, he admits that he admires Friedrich von Hayek of the Austrian school, which is allegedly on the opposite side of the political spectrum, from the standpoint of radical free market ideology and so on. The way that you deal with it is you strengthen the actual truly human identity, which is that we are made in the image of the Creator. And it is by virtue of our creative reason, which we have uniquely as a species, that we can discover how the universe works, improve our relationship to nature, but to do that from the standpoint of the unique human qualities of a love of wisdom, love of nation, love of family. These are ideas. These are not simply, physical emotions. That we make our decisions from the standpoint of this quality of love and hope and optimistic hope for the future. The American system is based on those principles, and they've gotten away with this left-right game, especially in the last century and the beginning part of this century, because they've written out the American system, a form of economic policy that says the wealth of a nation is based on the productive powers of labor, i.e., you have to cherish creativity, education, family formation, and those kinds of qualities which allow us to exert greater dominion over nature. So your question really opens up a wide spectrum of things that we could and will discuss more thoroughly. which in the future, and which we do discuss in our Saturday classes. I'm going to give a plug for that right now. Every Saturday night, Promethean Action does a live Zoom class, national Zoom class, where our historians, our philosophers, our scientists present these deeper ideas and look at how they play out in terms of statecraft, in terms of history, and so on. So I encourage people to go to the Promethean Action website and make sure you are getting our newsletter and following some of these live discussions which take up these larger, deeper questions. But in short, I think the antidote to it is cherish the knowledge, understand the history, which drives from the idea that man is in the image of the Creator and we're not an animal. And then you've dried up the swamp within which these other ideologies function.
Barbara, would you like to say anything?
No, that was exactly what I would have hoped to have said, but she said much better than I could.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'll say a few final things here. Please, if you haven't yet already, like the video. On Saturday, we're going to be having our next political update that's going to be delivered by Barbara Boyd. So please subscribe. Hopefully YouTube will give you a notification or put it in your feed when we do our next political update on Saturday. If you've been watching and you've really liked what we had to say, get our newsletter. It's completely free. You do not have to give us a monthly subscription. You'll get much of our content for free. You'll get all of our updates when we go live, when there's a breaking story happening, whenever we post a video, a new political update, we'll send you an email. We also have some plans. I have some plans to begin to deliver more daily news updates in them too. So if you want to stay in contact with us, please get our newsletter. Also, next week's questions. If you're subscribed to our newsletter, I'm going to be putting a link in the email I send tomorrow. There's going to be a link to ask questions for next week's show. So I'd like to thank everyone in the chat, especially you guys that keep coming back every week. We really appreciate it. There's about 1,500 people now across the world that come every week. We've been doing this for over 2 months. We're slowly building up the amount of supporters we have in the chat. We have so much less trolls. All the trolls aren't coming back, but the best people are coming back. And just like Susan said earlier, we have a new incoming thing to handle all the incoming emails that we're getting. If you want to reach us to ask a question or offer your support in any way, please just reply to one of our emails, tell us what you can help with, and we will get back to you. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next Thursday. Take it easy.